The idea for the project started out in 2010 at a Madison County Leadership Academy, and the original concept was exclusively economic development and recreation. You know, the mission of that organization at the time was to think, how can we create some additional activity within Madison and Delaware County? And so what happened was that Leadership Academy ended, and Rob Sparks with the Corporation for Economic Development began talking to some civil engineers that he had contact with in the past and said, hey, what do you think about this idea? And one of the groups was DLZ Engineering. And a couple of the DLZ engineers said, do you have any idea what's going on in central Indiana over the past 5 to 10 years with respect to water supply? And the answer of Rob was, no, not really. And you know, as they explored the idea further, and they said, and basically it became apparent that this needed to be something much different than originally intended. It can have great economic impact if it's well planned and designed. But the primary purpose here, really at this point, is there a water need? You know, is there a need for this water that would be in this reservoir? And that's and so phase one, we'll talk in a little more detail, but phase one of the project really just kind of explored the concept, looked at if there is at all a water need, and then we moved on to phase two. So as I mentioned, the idea changed rapidly. So one of the first questions that's been wrestled with a lot is, if you're going to build this reservoir, and you say it's going to be for as a water resource, is there a need? And I mean, that's something that's obviously going to be talked about by other speakers today, and I would certainly defer to them on many of these issues. But based on the data we've been able to look at, it's publicly available, we've made some observations. First, when the reservoirs that supply much of the drinking water for central Indiana were constructed in the 1940s to the 1960s, the population of that area was somewhere between 500 and 700,000 people. The same area today has a population of approximately 1.8 million people. There hasn't been any major surface water resources brought online since those reservoirs were constructed. So just intuitively, you begin to think maybe the system's getting stretched a bit thin. The top 4 fastest counties in the state, not surprisingly to the people in this room, you know, are located in central Indiana. Indianapolis has been one of the fastest growing metro areas in the country for several years. We've seen additional industry come into the area. And Indiana has continued to be one of the top states in the nation for industrial water usage, albeit some of that is skewed with electric power plants and so forth. But, I mean, central Indiana has been known for having a reliable, quality water supply that has been in a way that we've attracted industries to the area. And we want to keep doing that. So currently, approximately 70% of central Indiana's water is derived from surface water sources. We know these sources are impacted during drought events. We see that even during minor to moderate drought events such as we had in 2012. So what does that mean? Well, we know that conservation is part of the answer. I mean, inevitably, a common to all, of course, is, you know, how can we conserve more water? How can we convince people to water lawns and other landscaping smartly, you know, during hot, dry summer months? We've all driven past sprinkler heads going off in the rain, and I'm sure we all had to twitch and cringe a little bit at that. Groundwater sources. Groundwater sources are, you know, certainly a great topic of debate at this point in time. When we look at groundwater sources, we know that there's groundwater available, you know, after we've had extended periods of wet weather. The sponge is full, for lack of a better way to say it. And so the way we got, you know, part of the way we were able to get through the 2012 drought as well as we did was to pump all those groundwater resources to address the needs at the time. What's not well understood is how those groundwater and surface water sources interact over longer periods of drought. We know that using groundwater on a more day-to-day basis certainly makes us more susceptible to drought events. And surface and groundwater sources are inherently complex, and the way they interact in central Indiana does not appear to be well understood at this time. So again, I think most people, regardless of where you're at this issue, would agree that there needs to be some additional study to better understand what's going on with surface and groundwater resources in central Indiana for the long haul. Now, we looked at a number of published studies. Some of these were done by Indianapolis Water in the past. The one quoted here was the Greater Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce. And in their totality, what these studies indicate is that without significant investment in additional resources and distribution improvements, Central Indiana will be unprepared for future growth and vulnerable to drought events. Again, with the announcement that Citizens Energy Group made today with bringing another small reservoir in the Geist area online, they're being very proactive in addressing these things. We look at this and we say, we're not sure if given an extended drought event, if there's been enough done, if there's been enough resources brought online, if we understand that interaction between groundwater and surface water well enough to say, hey, we're ready for whatever comes at us. And we looked carefully at these other reports. I'm not quoting anything from the reports here, but again, the overarching conclusion is that something additional needs to be done. There probably needs to be additional, there does need to be additional resources, and there undoubtedly has to be better systems of distribution between systems and interconnection between different utilities. So, where are we at in the process? So back in 2008, 2009, we started, it's been, actually it's not 2008, that should be 2010, I apologize. We started looking at this feasibility study, or phase one of the process. And that was done, just with some private conversations, starting to talk about, hey, did this really happen? The way that was funded was through private donations of people from Madison County. DLZ Engineering was hired to take a look at some just publicly available information for us. We looked at available geotechnical information from recent bridge construction and other available sources. And, the DLZ guys came back and said, look, we don't see any major fatal flaws in this level of analysis, but it's very early. You need to spend a lot more money and get into this and really answer some questions. So we developed a scope of work for what we termed as the phase two study. The phase two study was completed in late 2013, early 2014. And that was primarily funded through an Indiana Finance Authority grant, a $605,000 grant that was used to perform some additional geotechnical work. We looked at existing water quality reports, did some feasibility on the dam design, and looked at a number of issues. We certainly didn't come close to answering all the questions. And I'll talk about some of the key findings here in a moment. So what we're in the process of right now is forming the Mounds Lake Commission. I'm not going to go into the details of what this commission is at this point in time, other than to say each of the governmental units, the city and the 3 towns that are most directly impacted, and each town, from probably the smallest of Daleville to the city of Anderson, have equal weight on the commission. So it's not as if Anderson is coming in and trying to say, hey, we're going to control this entire process because we have the most population that's impacted here. As Jane mentioned, the Anderson City Council approved entering into the commission. The ordinance that is behind the commission actually says that this would take us through the viability stage, going through the permitting process, but before the reservoir was constructed, we have to come back to the governmental units and for approval. So it's not as if this gives the commission just the license to go ahead and build the project. So some of the key findings we found from the feasibility report. So Mounds Lake has the ability to produce 60 million gallons a day during the most severe reported drought conditions. That's the 40-41 drought. We modeled the capacity of the reservoir versus the drought conditions at the time, and we could still produce 60 million gallons a day during that period throughout that drought event. During all other drought events, including the 88 drought, some other statistically significant events, we can produce up to 78 million gallons a day. The natural and historic resources can be protected, and we would say they can be enhanced in some cases with regards to increased miles of trails and things like that. From day one, when we sat down with the regulatory agencies before this was even publicly announced and said, hey, we've got this idea we want to throw out there and see what some of your guys think. What we heard repeatedly was, at all cost, you have to protect the mounds. And all of us involved wholeheartedly agree. You can't do anything that's going to cause, a potential problem with the mounds at Mounds Park. We do believe there can be some increased trails. Natural recreation opportunities will change. but we believe that the actual amount of opportunities could increase depending on how public access is planned by the individual communities. We also recognize from the phase 2 work we did, because basically I mentioned in phase 1 we looked at some existing geotechnical data. Phase 2 we did some additional borings near the dam and a handful within the footprint of the reservoir. What's become apparent to us is we don't have nearly enough data as far as from the geotechnical standpoint. That would be a major area where we would spend some money, get out there and do what we need to do to understand what's going on within the pool if we're moving forward. Additional water quality investigation. And I won't get too far off on this path. I know it's a topic that's discussed later on today with regards to water quality in the Upper White. I was talking to somebody even before the conference today, as we look at water quality, my background is in water quality. I think the right thing to do is to invest in improving water quality in Indiana streams. As it relates to this project, one perspective is, improved water quality is an improved commodity as far as the utility that may ultimately sell this water. So it's in our best interest to do everything we can to work with these watershed groups from the reservoir back upstream all the way up to Winchester to see is there some low-hanging fruit? Are there some water quality projects that have been identified but for funding issues or whatever the case may be have not been pursued? We can't cure all the water quality ills between Anderson and the headwaters, but we can do some things to improve water quality in a significant way that may not happen but for the resources that this project can bring. So that's actually something that personally I'm fairly excited about. Additional subsurface investigation as it relates to environmental issues. So what we did in phase 1 and phase 2, just very quickly, is phase 1, we just basically cataloged. It was fairly informal. It was a few of us sitting around with institutional knowledge of the city of Anderson and where the footprint of the pool is to say, okay, there's a lot of urban legends surrounding these sites, and we just listed those out. Phase 2, we did a deeper dive into all the data we could get our hands on. Whether this was information on the virtual file cabinet, information contained within the city of Anderson, wherever we could find a phase 1 or phase 2 report that had been done that somebody would share with us, we took a look at that. We didn't go out and do any actual borings for a couple of reasons. One, with the amount of money we had available to us, we could not have done a thorough study. And a less than thorough study probably leaves as many questions as it answers. And secondly, because this is a public project, if we go out there and we find something on someone's property, we've immediately created a liability for them with no resource to help them address that. Do these things need to be taken care of? Absolutely. But are we in the business of putting somebody's property at risk and so forth? No. So we've elected at this time, we have this catalog of sites, and if we were to move forward, that would be something high on the priority list to get out there and actually do a thorough subsurface investigation to understand what's going on. We set aside the budget. And again, this wasn't just an arbitrary number. We did some fairly significant analysis of these sites, what could be there, the quantities of materials that could be there, and assuming a complete removal. Because there would be no in situ treatment if you're talking about a drinking water reservoir. You're talking about going in, digging it up, and hauling it away. We came up with an estimate of $35 million. That estimate could be wildly higher. But we set aside $35 million. A wildly higher estimate is a fatal flaw to the project, potentially. But we won't know that until we get out there and actually do the investigation. So on the financial side of the project, and I'll touch on this briefly, the total project cost is estimated at $450 million. This isn't an estimate that was arrived at lightly. We looked at every project feature and included contingencies for each of those features to come up with the total $450 million cost. We believe that number is a solid number. Can things happen with projects to change that? Of course they can. That's what we've arrived at. At that number, the project is economically feasible based on the sale of 40 million gallons of water, assuming current market rates. We actually looked at some of the recent contracts with Lake Patoka because it's a reservoir that are selling water to utilities to come up with some of these numbers. And this assumes and when I say it's economically feasible, this assumes no subsidies or grant funds put into the project. So at that $450 million number, if we can sell 40 million gallons of water, we think economically the project works. We do believe that there would be a combination of private and public sector funding as we move through the next phase of investigation, permitting, and design. We don't know where those funds exactly come from. We had a list of potential sources that we would work with to try to secure those funds. And phase 3, the permitting phase, is estimated to cost in total about $28 million. The question has been asked, and very validly so are you telling us that you got to spend $28 million before you know if this project is even technically feasible? The answer is no. We would take this and we would break up the scope of this in logical pieces. We do estimate to understand, what's going on out there from a technical standpoint, that you're going to have to spend $5 to $7 million. It's a large project, it covers a lot of ground. It's going to take a lot of work to go through that process. One other issue I'll mention here with regards to the permitting process. Again, kind of regardless of where you stand on this project, whether you are a fan of the project or you hate the project, there's a very rigorous inherent check and balance here, and that's the state and federal permitting process. Obviously, with this audience, you guys understand full well, some of the hurdles that this project would have to clear if it were to ever actually happen. We believe if we can run that gauntlet, and that standard is exceedingly high, and as it should be for a drinking water resource that you're talking about being in place for a generation to come, then we've got a solid project. If we can't, then we don't. The project needs to stand on its own 2 legs. We feel that the project has enough merit to proceed to answer some of those questions. The other piece of this is there has to be the development of a viable water utility for this project to work. Now, that viable water utility could take on many different forms. But you can't build this project on the backs of taxpayers or subsidies or anything like that. There's simply not enough tax base in Madison County to even begin to think about that. So you've got to figure out a way to make this happen, be it you have private investors invest in this for the long term, or it's a utility that gets involved, or whatever the case may be. The other piece I was just going to mention, from the beginning, we've really tried to make an effort to get out and talk about this project to a lot of people. We've tried to count. We've been at more than 30 public meetings, being city council meetings, park board meetings, different public venues. There's been 50 presentations to various other groups, like this group, school groups, service organizations, and so forth. And over 4,000 people attended the Imagine Mounds Lake sessions at the mall and in each of the communities where the reservoir has an impact. So future considerations, I'll go through these somewhat quickly because each of them is probably its own conversation. Future land uses and transportation. Well, one step I'll back up. With regards to future considerations, our goal is to the reason the commission is being formed is because we do want some uniformity with regards to the quality of standards throughout the reservoir. There has to be an agreement on is what's the minimum threshold with regards to building adjacent to the reservoir and so forth. And that's going to be the job of the commission and their consultants to figure that out. But beyond that, it's up to the individual communities to determine what this means to their community. So future land use and transportation, which of course includes the bridge conversation. Everyone agrees there's probably too many bridges, but nobody wants the bridge that goes to be their bridge. Water delivery options and drought protection. We talked a little bit about drought protection with the capacity that the reservoir brings with 60 million gallons a day during the 40-41 drought. The water delivery options are really interesting because given geographically where Mounds Lake is located, you could obviously release more water into the White River to deliver to downstream communities and downstream utility pickups. Given its proximity, you could feed into Fall Creek through Foster's Branch, a legal drain in Madison County, which leads into Geist. And there's a theory that was originally called smart water to say that perhaps you could use this reservoir to balance the other Morris and Geist and prepare for a drought, going into a drought season where you've got all 3 reservoirs basically, to capacity, and you move forward. Again, there's a lot of infrastructure that has to go into place to make those things happen. Water quality enhancements, as we mentioned briefly earlier, we think there are some things this project could do. And I'd love to hear some perspective from some of the folks in this room. Buffer strips, for a while, that was, everyone was really excited. Farmers were putting in buffer strips. Some of the data seems to be coming back and saying, hey, buffer strips help, but you're short-circuiting many times with county legal drains and illegal drains and just drainage into tributary streams and ditches. So what that means, we're not sure, but we'd really like to integrate some water quality enhancements upstream of the reservoir. Environmental mitigation and enhanced natural areas. When you're talking about a project of this size, you're going to have to do a lot of mitigation. We don't know exactly what that looks like. What we'd like to do is the mitigation that has to be done, have it done in such a way that it is upstream of the reservoir, that it's within the watershed to enhance the water quality of the water coming into the White River and ultimately into the reservoir. Renewable energy options. Needless to say, when you start talking about a dam, everyone starts asking about, hey, is there a hydropower option? Is there a micro hydropower option, which is probably more likely than a dam of this size? And the answer is, sure, there is. Does it produce enough energy to make it viable? We don't know yet. There may be some other areas where you get some other land that gets acquired that you could do some ground-mounted solar, something like that we've talked about. Sustainable practices, specifically when it comes to demolition of structures. Again, there's a lot of structures we're talking about here. And what we'd like to do is really, we have time in this case. We're not knocking down a bunch of old buildings to build a new factory that needs to be up and running next year. So is there a way that we can go in and take apart buildings, take out materials, recycle a really high percentage to try to really set a high standard for this project? And really be an example, to the country and the world. Impacts up and downstream. Impacts on up and downstream drainage. Again, this is one where we don't have a lot of answers yet. We have a lot of questions. In a very valid way, many farmers have expressed concerns about what's this do to regional drainage, those kinds of things. How does this impact downstream drainage? To be clear, this is a water supply reservoir, not a flood control reservoir, which, as you guys know better than I, many of you, I'm sure, you operate very differently. We do think it would probably have some favorable effects on downstream flooding. Again, we haven't looked at that, we haven't modeled that in any detail, just somewhat intuition tells us it would. Unique recreational opportunities. Again, when we talk about Mounds Park, and personally, my family goes to Mounds Park weekly, we love to walk on the trails there. We think that Mounds Park would change. It actually could expand an area because we've looked at some areas where Mounds Park could expand. It would become the Mounds Park, it would become the state park on the lake. You could have an arena there, you could do a lot of interesting things depending on what DNR and others want to do in the future. So that's something we just need to take a look at in the future. Okay, so the advantages of Mounds Lake, and that really means the advantages of Mounds Lake compared to some other ideas that have been put out there in the past. Mounds Lake has a large watershed. And when we look at Morris, Geist, and Eagle Creek, the watershed that we would be talking about is 67% of those three reservoirs combined. So that's significant, which gives us a much higher flow stream to recharge Mounds Lake than some of those other reservoirs. The total capacity is 11 billion gallons, and the reason we're able to hold 11 billion gallons in a reservoir that's fairly narrow in parts is the banks are fairly steep. We maintain a fairly good depth in most of the reservoir. We don't have these very, very shallow areas which lend themselves to some of the ecological issues we have with algal blooms and those kinds of things. We're upgrading from central Indiana, which creates opportunities for efficient delivery. We talked a little bit about that. Again, I've said this 2 or 3 times now. 60 million gallons a day, 78 during all other times. And obviously, this is a relative statement. It's a cost-effective solution compared to some of the other options that have been put out there in the past. And again, the model's kind of flipped upside down from the beginning. At the beginning, everything was how does this impact the economy in Anderson and Madison County and secondarily Delaware County. At this point in time, when we look at this, it's basically, look, if the local communities plan and execute how this impacts them correctly, this could have a positive impact on their communities. This isn't the fix from an economic development standpoint for the city of Anderson or any of these areas. It's one small piece of a much larger puzzle that the communities like Anderson are wrestling with right now. So what are our next steps? Formation of the commission. You know, right now we're in the midst of the votes with these local units, and we're working through that. You know, we don't have another one on the schedule right now. Anderson is on board, and the other three are Chesterfield, Daleville, and Yorktown. The state and federal permitting process. We have 2018. We know we're a bit optimistic probably on that. You know, that could stretch out further depending on kind of what happens. But again, we're just thinking, okay, if this goes by the numbers and everything works, 2018. Property acquisition and final design. We'd be looking at through 2019, completing design, acquiring property. We've had conversations with the vast majority of property owners. And undoubtedly, there are going to be some property owners who just don't want to sell and don't like the project. But most of these people, once we explain the federal process and how this is going to work, and that they can be paid for moving expenses and those kinds of things, many people say, all right, well, maybe this isn't the worst thing for me. Construction. We estimate construction going from 2020 through the end of 2021. So maybe you have a full pool by the end of 2022, depending on a lot of different factors. And that is the end of my prepared presentation. Jane, I don't know how you plan to do this. Is there time for a couple of questions?
Yes, there certainly is.
Okay. Yes, you're first.
If there is a phase 3 study, would there be any inclusion in that of a breach analysis to show the effect of that on downstream areas and inundation areas, and if so, would that be made public?
The study would definitely be done. As far as it being made public, quite frankly, from our perspective, it would be made public. The only thing I have concerns about is that a homeland security concern that information would be made public. We would, under confidentiality.